What's your carnal theory?
Hey there, you're listening to Carnal Theory, where we talk with experts from around the world to learn how taking command of our sexual story affects our personal wellness, sexual experiences, and relationships with ourselves and others. Hello, everyone. I am Abba.
And I'm Amanda. Today on Carnal Theory, we're sitting down with not one, but two people. Today we have King Noire and Jet Setting Jasmine. We spoke to Jasmine in February during an Instagram Live, if you caught that, where we discussed sex and the senses, and we're really excited to have her and her partner back on today for a longer conversation. Jasmine is a licensed clinical therapist who focuses her work on intimacy, post-injury, and post-illness. And King is a writer, an MC, an activist. They're both adult entertainers, educators, master fetish trainers, and have together founded Royal Fetish Films. And they're working hard to change the future of pornography to be a more ethical and inclusive one. And to be honest, I just scratched the surface of what you two do, so I can't wait to dive in more. Thank you, Jasmine and King, for gracing us with your presence today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having
Yeah,
us.
we're really excited. So to start off, as we do every show, we're going to ask you two to share the carnal theory that you've brought for our consideration. And for new listeners, just to give context to this theory, it's something that we're going to be diving into. It's meant to challenge a perception or presumption that we might have about something. Our theme for this month, we're discussing healthy masculinity, which this theory that's been brought focuses on. And just as a general disclaimer for this episode, for everybody listening, we want to mention that we are very likely to be using the words and the terms men and women quite a bit. And we want to be clear that we're referring to male identifying people, female identifying people. We are an inclusive judgment-free zone here. So please keep that in mind as we use the language that comes out. So Jasmine, King Noire, if you could please share the theory that you've brought for us to consider.
Okay, so up for consideration and healthy debate and discourse is healthy masculinity should be defined by the individual instead of in the context of women and or cultural stereotypes, and it should start with the relationship to self.
Boom.
Actually, boom. Yeah. Thought it could be fun to start in breaking this down a little bit, just to get your perspectives on what healthy masculinity is when you're talking about this, in this context.
So I'm happy to kind of share that. My own process of thinking they want us to come up with a concept or a philosophy around healthy masculinity, what are my thoughts? And my first thought is, unfortunately, toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is something inherently wrong about thinking about healthy masculinity, and the synonymous thought is toxic masculinity. So immediately I'm already bringing in the relationship to men's health or male identifying folks' health as it relates to their behavior towards others. And so immediately decentering the health of men immediately. So that was just sharing the perspective that I brought to the table, and then fleshing it out with King, who you can share your initial thoughts and how we came to.
I think my initial thought with it was how much manhood and masculinity is defined by what you're not instead of what you are. I think that so many men base their masculinity or their manhood on everything outside of them instead of what actually is their internal idea of what it means to be good and healthy as a human being and as a male presenting person or a person with a penis, however people identify. I think masculinity, even for people who might not have been born male, who are then looking to take on what is considered to be, masculine traits, we do usually define it as, okay, well, what are you not going to be anymore that is going to make you masculine? Mm-hmm. So I think to truly find what's healthy is to stop looking outward and start actually looking inward, and then what the positive parts that we have within ourselves are what we can share with the world in a positive way.
Really grateful that you brought that up. Yeah. So literally in trying to figure out what our theme was, as we're fleshing out themes for the year, toxic masculinity has constantly come up, and has come up within our staff and our board and our people. And we realize how much like aggression or like pushing away of this toxic masculinity, this phrase, how toxic it was becoming to hear for male identifying people. So we were like, all right, well, what if we flip that on its head and we actually try to look at the other side of it? Does that make it any more enticing to actually talk about? So really appreciate you mentioning that. And I think it's a really good perspective that is where our brains go. And how fucked up is that is just the default. Not good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people have to think about toxic masculinity first, because their survival is endangered by toxic masculinity. It's kind of like when, white people are like, why are you always thinking about race? Because you're trying to kill me. You know what I'm saying? Like I have to survive. So race has to be in the forefront of my mind in order to make sure that I stay safe in situations where racists are going to kill me. So I think for women, for LGBTQIA folk, and also for other men, they have to think like, how can this toxic ass masculinity harm me today? How can it kill me? So I do think that it's natural for our brains to go to survival instinct before anything else, mm-hmm. When you think about like what self-actualization, that's always like the last thing people are thinking of. Mm-hmm. So hopefully if men can start to do that on their own time, then you don't have to expect everybody else, because it's not other people's jobs to make you a better man or masculine presenting person, right? It's your own job.
And hopefully we can talk about maybe some of your thoughts on how that might be possible today too. The other, continuing to look at the theory that you brought, healthy masculinity should be defined by the individual. So we've kind of gotten into that a little bit, instead of the context of women or other cultural stereotypes. It starts with the relationship to yourself. Do you feel like you identify, King, as with a good relationship, a healthy relationship to your masculinity? And if so, do you have a story of that path of how you got on that road? Because as we've just discussed, it's not necessarily the default.
Yeah, it's I think I'm healthy and healing. I think it's a daily process, because we do start with ourselves, but then we also have to realize no matter what it is that we do, it does affect our fellow human beings. So you're going to have to learn to process the information like, oh, well, maybe this was healthy for me to do in my space. You know what I'm saying? But it's not healthy for me to do in everybody's space. Or, maybe it's healthy for me to speak to one person or communicate in this way, but other people have different experiences. So I have to use more words and or describe different things or whatever in a different way so that they can understand or I'm communicating better. And I think that for me, things that I've experienced in my life that have just gotten me to that point. I mean, I would like to think that I was raised with respect for everybody, from my mother and my grandmother, but also I know that there are definitely toxic traits that I picked up growing up, because I thought that's what a man was supposed to be, like thinking that, I'm supposed to solve disputes with other men with my hands all the time, and that's not healthy for anybody. I definitely think that I had a time when I would use language that was offensive to other people, and I had to get checked on it because I didn't want people using language that was offensive to me. So I had to actually be like, yeah, that's wrong, and actually admit it was wrong and apologize to people that I have wronged and work to do better to understand how to not wrong other people. And that's why I say I think it's a healing process. Like, we can start to be healthy, but you have to continue to heal.
Can I jump in on, there's some, I can't explain your relationship to your healthy masculinity or not, but there were a couple of things that I heard that I'm like, that's an indicator. You shared like, I had to learn, I had to understand. And that is the basis of a relationship with self, right? Men don't get to see themselves, men and women, like we categorize people in such a way that you don't even get a chance to learn yourself as an individual. You learn yourself as a man in this culture, right? And whatever that means, and then having to kind of unlearn that. And as you learn yourself as an individual, we're saying like, oh, I wouldn't want anyone speaking to me that way. Then we start to see other people as individuals and not like that very generalized blanket throw. So when you do have an opportunity to learn yourself, you inherently are learning how to learn individuals and have these interpersonal relationships, instead of the kind of like this generalization of men are like this and women are like this, or these people are like this and I am like this because I'm a man, versus I'm like this because I've made these decisions about myself, or I've chosen these preferences at this point in time in my life. So yeah, the way you were sharing, I therefore have a relationship with yourself.
I think also within this culture, we are through generations, we have been taught that men's opinions, men's ideas take precedent over women's thoughts and ideas, right? And I'll also include men that have been prescribed like a connotation of weakness. Like if you're gay or you're trans, then somehow you no longer have man brain or some shit. I don't know how they describe, they make this correlation, but usually when you watch films, mm-hmm. they're about men. So you're getting a wide array of man shit, like what men think, what men do, how they do this, how they do that. Men of all levels of society, from like a coal miner mm-hmm. to an investment banker to a performer to this, but you don't see that with women. Mm-hmm. You also don't see a lot of films where there are no men and it's just women, mm-hmm. but you could find a whole lot of films where there's like a woman might have a line like, here's your coffee, and that's it. You know what I mean? So I think that societally, men then also are propped up in the school. We learn about our founding fathers. We learned about man did this, man did that throughout history. You look at, there was a comedian we were just watching, and she was showing like, oh, if you look at paintings of ancient Greece, it's men naming shit and having ideas and doing things. And what do they show? 3 women in the fucking forest, naked, holding a fruit. Like they don't have conversations. They don't name the fruit. They don't, you know what I'm saying? Like
just bear the fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically. So I think a lot of men grow up without realizing that women have diverse thoughts, different perspectives, not just from them, but from other women. You know what I'm saying? Like people always throw blanket categorical statements like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or mm-hmm. women do this. Mm-hmm. And if you're always taught that in every aspect of society, being toxic is pretty fucking easy for a lot of men, because also you're bigged up for that activity with other men. They're like, oh yeah, you told her, whistling at her. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever the situation is, it's still kind of like, oh, that was just man stuff. Like I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I was watching a movie with my son. I was trying to find like a friendly, he likes sports. So I'm trying to find a friendly sports movie for a 2-year-old. And I was watching this movie I remember from when I was a kid. It's called Sandlot.
Oh yeah.
And Sandlot is super popular, like for people from like the 90s. Like it's a famous movie. People still say lines from it. And there's a whole scene in that movie where this one little boy pretends that he's drowning so that the woman lifeguard will give him like mouth to mouth so he can kiss him. And like, even in that movie, they were like, it was kind of wrong, but he's a legend now, and we all think he's the greatest. And then when they walk past the thing after he basically sexually assaulted this woman, she's like smiling at him. You know what I'm saying? So now I'm like, damn, I don't want to show this to my 2-year-old no more. Like, this is not okay.
Yep.
You know, but it's like, these things are like okay within the society.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just like that through all aspects of the culture and the society.
Yeah, and I just want to underline, just to connect like what you're saying in the theory and what you've just said. You're talking about in context of women and or cultural stereotypes, looking at healthy masculinity there. These are the narratives that were all pitched, that we're all told are the right, correct narratives to live and what we should want to be and surround ourselves with. So it's all of this influence, whether we are, as you just pointed out, like what movies that we saw growing up, like whether we just totally subconscious brainwashing of how we're supposed to act and react. And in that framework, as the woman, it's like, oh, well, just get along with my day. But, the man, take, and there's no consequence. There's no other external factors coming in.
There's reward.
Yeah, full reward.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, I think too, tying it back to the theory, when we're only learning through, like in that situation, like let's just say our 2-year-old was like maybe 6, right? Or 7, a little bit more understanding. Being able to narrow in on how does he feel about what he just saw, right? Instead of like, you shouldn't do that to women. That is not good, right? Men shouldn't do that. And so that's like, again, categorically, men shouldn't, women feel. And just being able to break that down and bring it back to the how you understand yourself. It is, how do you feel about what happened to that lady? How do you feel about her being tricked? Would you trick a woman like that? Would you trick anybody? How would you feel if you were tricked? What's another way that he could have got that kiss? How could he have expressed that he really liked her? And then we're allowing this child, which we can do the same activity with any adult. And as adults, we could do this with ourselves. It's like me watching a movie where there's like a damsel in distress and she does this and then down the refrigerator. And I remember breaking up like that with guys because that's the way and then I would think like, do I really want to slide down this? Like, what is that going to bring him back? Is he even going to see it? Because where can I post this at when I'm 16? Like we didn't have where you could like do a subtweet breakup, right? So why was I doing that? It was learned behavior. But then when I asked myself, how is this going to actually help me process this pain? And I was like, yeah, it's not. Yeah. Okay. Well, what would make me feel better? So then like getting into the self. And I do think that hopefully the listeners are, especially if they're male listeners, can understand, like, you don't have to take this browbeating of like, oh, I got to do what women want or politically correct. Just take a minute and really think about how this feels within you without all of these external influences. What are you thinking?
No, it's so funny because like when you do see this, people get called out for something, it then becomes like you use the term like politically correct, right? And it's not particularly politics, you know what I'm saying? But even if it is, why would you not want to be correct?
Yeah, or what
why would you want to be?
Yeah,
why would you want to be wrong?
Offensive.
You know what I'm saying? Especially if you're wronging somebody.
Yeah.
So I do think when it's not even just like it's a brainwashing per se, it's just been accepted. Yeah. And people pass it down without even actively trying to make somebody even think that. They're just like, yo, this is just the way it is or the way it's always been. So, it's okay. Instead of once you come to that realization of self, you question everything. Especially the things that if somebody told me, yo, this behavior that you've been doing has been extremely harmful to me. And that behavior that you've been doing, people have been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years and harming people for hundreds and thousands of years. Why would I not want to be somebody to be like, well, I don't want to continue that shit. The buck stopped here, you know, but I think that some people are very, they're clingy. They're very clingy to bad habits and even more clingy to bad power.
What's easy?
It's addicting.
It's so much easier to just accept, it's easier to not question, to just allow yourself to be ignorant of of these norms. I'm curious if we could shift slightly to a topic more related to sex and sexuality. I think often there's this, in our experiences on the topics we're writing about, we are a very female, a female dominant organization. Like most of our employees are female. And so I think often we try and remind ourselves, you know, we want to bring in more conversations about the male perspective, but sometimes we think that the reasons that it's mostly female centered is because we are females or we are female identifying people. But I feel like often from our research and our partnerships, this movement to bring about healthier, more inclusive, more empowering sex education is just very female centered. And it kind of feels like we aren't presenting the opportunities for males or male identifying people to come into that conversation because it's kind of like this reclaiming of our sexuality for females. And so there's like a different context that it's taking place in for us. But I would love to hear more about what you think about, like, how do we get that entryway open wider so that this can be a conversation about, you know, healthy sexuality that's inclusive to more than just females and female identifying people, and the importance of that.
I have strong thoughts.
I do too.
Okay.
You can go first.
Thank you so much. So I'll try to keep it brief, knowing that you got some strong ones too. There's a part of me that feels like the conversations that women are having around sex and sexuality are universal, and we can all learn from them. They're conversations that we should have never been shut out from to begin with. So that reclamation that you're talking about, I think it's due. Like, it's due. We all have Wi-Fi, so we should be using it to definitely catch up on these conversations with each other. I think that men have always been invited to everything. They've been invited to housework. They've been invited to helping raising the children. They've been invited to equal pay. They've been invited to, lobbying for our bodies. They have been invited to these conversations. And I do believe the door remains open. So I don't think that we need to do anything more. The world, through our conversation and King's illustration of how men are able to see themselves in the world, there's no door that they cannot enter. So even for us to sort of kind of have this, like, honestly, it's like a fake ego to think that we have these sacred female spaces. We don't. We're on their server. They get to put their banner on our whatever that is probably negating whatever the freaking message is that we're trying to push forward. So I don't think that women should place any additional energy and any energy from what we need to heal from the toxicity that we talked about earlier to making it more inclusive. Our job has historically been to get this information, whether it is about like how to clean a wound to how to have a healthy conversation in a marriage. It has historically been our job to go and get this information, read the articles, have the doing your hair at the barber at the beauty salon, talking about these things and then bringing it home. So we've been doing that. I don't think that there is a lack of understanding of how one can behave to make things more equitable. It's more of accepting that you are going to have to relinquish some of that toxic power or some of those things in order for that equity. And I don't think people often want to come to a conversation where they may be asked to leave something at the table that has been a privilege to them. So That's kind of my thought. They know what to find these podcasts. They're not hidden. They're under the relationship section, the sex section, the gender equality section. Like their categories right there underneath sports is, right above sports is sex.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we're right there.
Yeah, I think kind of building off what you just said, like invitation, and it's not an invitation, you know, like I think men have blocked women from pleasure, from positions of power. I mean, but if we're just talking sex, like men have gone out of their way to block women's pleasure and women's sexual freedom and reproductive rights and you know, castrate and, you know,
cock block, all of it. Change the laws. We can't buy certain toys in certain states. Like they've been busy on our sex. I'm sorry.
No, I think the problem is more men need men's groups where men can learn about our bodies, where men can learn about healthy sexual practices, where consent can be the word that everybody has all the time in the forefront of their brains. And those things don't happen. And it's not up to women to make those things happen. The burden shouldn't be placed on women to make that happen. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it's really interesting. Like you still have men out there debating on whether women can have an orgasm. So do you really want that motherfucker to come into your space and have this conversation with you? He's light years behind this conversation. He still needs to learn anatomy and
how to wipe his ass.
Yeah. You know, it's like there are certain men that are holding on to this toxicity so hard that it's like they don't belong in the space yet. They haven't earned that space yet. You know, I do think like, and I say this a lot, I think there is a certain, even prior to what has become kind of like a sexual revolution, right? Mm-hmm. Mothers or elders within the community, older women to younger women, have a few conversations in life. You know, even if it starts with, you know, how to clean yourself, to your first period, towards you're moving out of this house, so I'm gonna have to tell you something real quick. Even if it's just those 3 conversations, it's kind of like 3 more than most men get. You know, whether it's washing your balls or your foreskin, to
I could smell that lack of education in some people.
You know, like having that lack of education, and a lot of men are kind of taught sex not from a pleasure perspective. They're taught from a power perspective. Yeah. You know, they're taught from this is how you push yourself, or this is how you trick someone, or this is, you know, you just want to get your nut. And so many people are taught that way, that a woman's pleasure is, again, light years away from the conversation that they need to have, even on, hey, women have ideas. Women like different things. Like how many men still you know, tout and talk shit about their move. Like you doing one move for 2 different people don't make no sense. Like you probably wouldn't even do that playing basketball. You know what I'm saying? So
that is a great line.
Yeah. You play basketball like that?
You know, I think that these conversations have to start from man to man. You know, and I do think it's funny. It's like one of those things that we talk about often. And like I said, I was raised by my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother. So I've seen generationally how men talk to women and how men talk to other men about the same topic. You know what I'm saying? So men will listen to a man say, oh yeah, you know, you want to make 2 lefts and a right. You from here? Nah, she is. You want to make 3 lefts. It's literally like right over there. And they'll be like, I'm gonna try the first thing that he said. You know what I'm saying? Like, just because they're more prone to listen to a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has to happen kind of with those sexual conversations as well. And in those conversations, people have to kind of put in those jewels like, yeah, she'll tell you what she likes. I don't know what she likes. I don't have a vagina, sir.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's important to, ask her. It's okay. She'll tell you. She knows her body.
I know we're not going to solve this in a matter of a few minutes, but I just basically got locked into that, like, men need to be talking to other men, but then we also said men toxically talk with one another.
Good point. So that is a really good point. I think it is the same generalization that we talked about, like the sweeping generalization that all men are toxic, that's wrong, right? Here we are with a healthy masculine man that I definitely challenge all the time to talk to other men, and he challenges himself accordingly too. We also, in our interactions, King will identify someone being toxic towards me, and we will like position that situation sometimes as an opportunity for them to learn, and for him to be like, I see what's going on here. Like, hang on a second, because he recognizes that behavior from both ends, seeing it done to women and seeing how men talk amongst themselves. So we can hold people that are to our standard of health for us, right, to be allies. We do it in terms of race all the time, and that might be easier for your audience to hear. What does an ally in this area look like?
Yeah.
Who is a woke enough man that can talk to other men? The same way, like when I talk to white people, like, oh, don't go talking on our behalf. No, read some more books. Well, other people, it's like, you know what? You seem to understand it. Go talk to other white people about that, So I think that for men that are listening to this and thinking like, am I a good enough source to be having these conversations with men? I'll say that if you sat through this podcast, you're already doing good. Just, if you even like clicked on that other section outside of like sports, automotive, tech, and finance, you're probably doing good, So if you think that women have ideas, go tell that to another man. Like, that's good enough. You don't have to do it. It doesn't have to be so rocket science. It doesn't have to be a 6-week curriculum. It really is just reframing some of the things that you're already saying and highlighting the fact that there are other people in this world that are influenced by how healthy our relationship to ourselves is.
For sure. I mean, like, I think about coming up, I might have been raised by women, but I did have positive male role models in my life as well. Like, and that's when I think of things that I learned from them, I'm like, that stuck with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, my sensei taught me certain levels of respect, not only for humanity, but also taught me about, respecting the women in my life and the women in the world, because they are under attack. And that's what he taught me from our school. And that has always stuck with me. I've heard a whole lot of toxic shit too, and I've worked to shed it off. Or when I first heard it, I was like, that's stupid. You know what I mean? So I think that they're also, when you start having those first few jewels that you receive or bits of information that you can build upon in your own time, or go read or whatever, like certain things, it's like ripping off layers of skin, and sometimes when you get a good pull, a whole lot come off, so it's very important that people hear the information and hear positive reinforcement of that information just as much as they get that bullshit brainwash.
Yep. And it's like, it's dead skin. Like, it's shit you don't need. Like, it just, like, it needs to go anyway. It's just hanging on without cause. Like, ugh. Get that out of here.
It's about to be summer. Exfoliate already.
Need to get an apricot scrub. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. This is, we haven't solved all the world's issues, but hopefully we've put a light on some paths for people to go and explore. Could you please say again the theory that you brought for us to consider, just for people to relate back to it, and maybe in the course of this conversation, there's already some perceptions changed.
Yes. So the Jet Setting Jasmine and King Noire theory on healthy masculinity stands at that it should be defined by the individual instead of in the context of women and or cultural stereotypes. And it starts with the relationship to self.
Bang.
You still holding true to that?
Absolutely.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, everyone. We hope this episode has given you something further to reflect upon. Reach out to us with your questions or insights on our Instagram page at Carnal Theory. And don't forget to check out King and Jasmine's work. You can find Jasmine on Instagram at JetSetJasmine, and you can find King at The Real King Noire. You can go online to kingnoire.com or jsjlinks.com and learn more. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Carnal Theory is produced by My Sex Bio. Our sound design is by Audrey Cohane, and our theme music by Men the Universe. My Sex Bio is an educational platform built to empower people like you to take command of your sexual biography. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify at My Sex Bio. Visit our website and join our e-letter at mysexbio.org and support our work by joining our Patreon. Thank you.